Youngspiration pair lose appeal over LegCo disqualification. Lau Siu-lai slams government action against her over oath-taking. And olive branch to opposition figures who don't have a mainland travel permit.
Good evening. The Court of Appeal has upheld a lower court ruling that disqualified Youngspiration pair Sixtus Leung and Yau Wai-ching as lawmakers. The judges say local courts can decide whether a lawmaker's oath is lawful, but they cannot question Beijing's basic law interpretation. Adam Shu has our top story.
In a written judgment today, Chief Judge of the High Court Andrew Cheung agreed with the Court of First Instance that the two localists had plainly refused to take the LegCo oath on October 12, a point even the dual had not disputed. Swearing allegiance, Cheung wrote, is a constitutional requirement, and failing that, lawmakers are disqualified automatically. Not least when the National People's Congress Standing Committee has spelled out the consequences in its basic law interpretation. Cheung added that once Beijing hands down the interpretation, it's beyond question that it's legally binding in local courts, and it applies to all cases since the handover in 1997. On whether the court should avoid interfering with LegCo affairs, Cheung clarified that the basic law is above the legislature, and the court has both the power and responsibility to rule on any possible breaches of the mini-constitution. Vice President of the Court of Appeal, Johnson Lam, added if the administrator wrongly rules an oath as unlawful, the oath-taker can also take it to court. Lam insisted, by dealing with such cases, the court is not being embroiled in political disputes. As for immunity from legal action the basic law grants to lawmakers, the judges reiterated it does not cover their swearing in. Leung and Yao said they were dismayed that the judgment repeatedly referred to the basic law interpretation, adding they were worried by appealing to the Court of Final Appeal it would trigger another interpretation.
I don't want to put the court in a difficult position. This is not something that I wish to do.
The pair admitted that the legal costs skyrocketing into millions of dollars was another thing they had to consider, but they hope to reach a decision on whether to file an appeal in a couple of days. Adam Xu, TVB News.
Well, there are mixed reactions to today's judgment, and as Caleb Long reports, there are now fresh questions about LegCo's independence.
After the Court of Appeal made the decision against Sixtus Leung and Yau Wai-ching, pro-establishment lawmakers voiced their support for the ruling.
We welcome the court judgment, and we think that the court judgment do clearly clarify the interpretation of basic law, and it establish very clearly its effect and the relevant regulation and authority.
Across the political divide, James To of the Democratic Party warned matters that LegCo used to deal with independently can now all be reviewed judicially. And he's hoping should an appeal take place, the Court of Final Appeal could clarify the limits of LegCo's independence. LegCo President Andrew Leung says Sixtus Leung and Yau Wai-ching have the right to take the case to the Court of Final Appeal, and he respects their right to do so. The LegCo chief also says he'll have to wait for a possible appeal before making his next move, such as gazetting their vacancies and recovering the dual salaries and expenses. By-elections would need to be held after the dual vacated their LegCo seats. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Raymond Tam says the Electoral Affairs Commission will set up a date for the by-elections after LegCo gazetted the vacancies. Tam says the whole process would take about 4 to 6 months. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
A third localist is also facing legal action by the government to take her oath properly. Lau Siu-lai today slammed the move as political persecution by the chief executive. The Democracy Groundwork lawmaker took 10 minutes to read her 77-word oath of allegiance last month, with long pauses in between words. She later posted on social media that her intention was to make the oath meaningless. The LegCo president had ruled her oath as invalid, but allowed her to retake it, which she eventually did successfully. Despite that, the Department of Justice says it would file a judicial review on behalf of the chief executive over the next few days, challenging the validity of Lau's oath. Lau promptly slammed the move, calling it political persecution by Leung Chun-ying.
I here call for the unite of all our colleagues and our citizens to fight against such political struggle, and I hope we all unite together to face such difficult time.
Lau added that her situation was different from the young-spiration pair Sixtus Leung and Yao Wai-ching, because her oath had been accepted and she had already started work as a legislator. Now, what's the impact of the case? LegCo motions can only be passed with majority support in the 35-seat functional constituency group, which is dominated by the pro-establishment camp, and the 35-seat geographical group. In the geographical constituencies, the non-establishment camp originally held 19 seats. That's 3 more than their pro-establishment counterparts. With the loss of the young-spiration pair's seats and the possibility that Lau may be disqualified as well, that leaves both camps neck and neck with 16 seats. Lau remained defiant, accusing the chief executive of being afraid of the Pan-Democrats' power in LegCo and trying to bend the rules of procedure to exert further control in LegCo. One of her supporters, Pan-Democrat Claudia Mo, also accused the CE of trying to disqualify Lau to boost his chances of running for a second term.
Next, an olive branch to opposition politicians. Beijing has reportedly allowed them to apply for a home return permit so that they can travel to the mainland. But as Rachel Leung reports, not everyone is interested.
Robert Chow, convener of the pro-establishment group Silent Majority for Hong Kong, made the announcement this afternoon during his visit to Beijing. Chow quoted the head of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, Wang Guangya, as saying those lawmakers would be able to come for visits to better understand the country. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying says he always supports the idea of granting pan-democratic legislators access to the mainland. He said the move would allow for easier and freer exchanges between local lawmakers and mainland officials, which would undoubtedly benefit the city. But not everyone is interested in the offer.
My return permit was being cancelled when during the occupation, when I was trying to go to Beijing and being blocked in the airport. And after that, I haven't been testing whether my home return permit is still valid or not. For me personally, I don't think it is suitable for me to go back to China now, because that's far more dangerous than the situation staying in Hong Kong.
I think it's really meaningless, because what happened is that they are already interpreting a basic law, and which is a destruction of our rule of law. And after that, they give you a small token of, home visit permit.
A number of lawmakers have not been able to renew their permits, including Leung Kwok-kung of League of Social Democrats and James To of the Democratic Party. To argued that as a Chinese citizen, he should not have been deprived of his legitimate right to a home return permit in the first place. Leung, meanwhile, was non-committal on whether he would try to get his permit renewed. In the past, lawmakers who didn't have permits were offered one-off grants to visit the mainland to attend political events. The new arrangement will apply to serving and former lawmakers who didn't renew their permits. Rachel Leung, TVB News.
And in Beijing, the head of a top think tank today had some harsh words for those advocating Hong Kong independence. Chen Zhou-er also criticized the way the Occupy movement in Hong Kong was handled. Evelina Leung has that story.
The visit by Silent Majority for Hong Kong to the capital continued today. Members of the pro-establishment group met with Chen Zhou-er, the head of the think tank China of Hong Kong and Macau Studies. During the meeting, Chan used a Chinese fable to describe those calling for Hong Kong independence. The story is about a compassionate scholar who once saved a wolf but was nearly eaten by the animal afterwards. Chan said Hong Kong people should not be like the compassionate scholar. He said they must deal with the independence advocates harshly because such calls cannot exist within the political framework of Hong Kong and the country. Chan added independence advocates should be beaten like mice on the streets. The meeting lasted for about half an hour. Afterwards, the group's convener met the press. Robert Chow said Chan criticized Hong Kong for not dealing with the illegal Occupy Central movement in 2014 in strict accordance with the law. For example, Chan questioned why some of those who broke the law have not been brought to justice yet. The head of the think tank is also said to have asked the people of Hong Kong to question whether the price the protesters paid for their illegal acts was too low, which encouraged them to commit more crime. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Still ahead in the news. South Korean opposition trying to come up with impeachment plan against Park Geun-hye. Brazil mourns plane crash victims. And Liverpool into League Cup Final Four.
And welcome back to TVB News. Malaysia has deported 74 telecom fraud suspects, 21 of them from Taiwan, to the mainland. Taipei has protested against the move. A plane carrying the suspects arrived in Wuhan late last night. Xinhua news agency says they were behind more than 500 phone and internet fraud cases. 53 of them are from the mainland, the rest from Taiwan. The Taiwanese Foreign Ministry says the move to deport them undermines ties between Taipei and Kuala Lumpur. That Beijing send the Taiwanese suspects back to the island, where they will face justice. Taipei accuses Beijing of putting pressure on Malaysia to send all the fraud suspects to the mainland. South Korea's opposition parties say they will continue with moves to impeach President Park Geun-hye over a growing corruption scandal, rejecting her offer yesterday to resign if Parliament lay down the groundwork. For Park, the next few days will determine what political price she'll pay and how much time she has bought. South Korea's opposition vowed today to push ahead with plans to impeach President Park Geun-hye over allegations she allowed a close friend to use her connections to the presidency for financial gain. In a dramatic move that shifted the burden of resolving the crisis, Park asked Parliament yesterday to decide how and when she should quit. The opposition has dismissed this as a calculated ploy to buy time and avoid impeachment. Park has also appointed a special prosecutor to conduct an independent and parallel investigation into the corruption scandal engulfing her presidency. Today, the leaders of the three opposition parties, which together hold 165 of the single-chamber parliament's 300 seats, said they would not negotiate with Park's party on her proposal to step down. Opposition parties will continue pushing for an impeachment vote on Friday, but will regroup and try again next week if they don't have enough initial support to impeach Park. The president appears to have bought herself valuable time, which could be used to lure back members of her Conservative Party who supported impeachment but are now having second thoughts. Park's conditional resignation proposal, if it delays impeachment, could give her time to search for a way to exit with some sense of grace, rather than be impeached and stripped of power. Some of Park's former allies who turn against her now say that Friday's impeachment vote should be pushed back. Some influential members of her ruling party also called for impeachment efforts to pause, while lawmakers examine how to set up a legal roadmap for Park's resignation proposal. Prosecutors investigating the case say there was collusion between Park and Choi Soon-sil, a friend and confidant, who allegedly had a large say in government affairs. Choi held no official government position and allegedly used her ties to the president to pressure companies into giving money to foundations and companies Choi controlled or founded. Park has denied the prosecutors' claims.
The hunt for clues has begun after Colombia's worst air disaster in 2 decades. The crash killed all but 6 of the 77 people on board and virtually wiped out a Brazilian First Division football team. James Aitken reports.
The charter plane was near its destination in north-central Colombia on Monday night when it slammed into a mountainside. Just before the crash, the crew of the British-made short-haul Avro had radioed it was having electrical problems. Soon after an emergency was declared, the plane disappeared from radar. The country's aviation agency says the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder have been recovered in good condition from the wreckage and are being analyzed. Based on an account from a surviving flight attendant, authorities are not ruling out the possibility the aircraft ran out of fuel minutes before it was to land. And experts say the route for that model of plane was at the upper limit of its flying range. The plane had been carrying most of the players from the Chapecoense football team to play in the first of 2 matches in a regional cup final. 21 Brazilian journalists were also on board. Only 6 people, 3 players, a journalist, and 2 crew members survived the disaster. In the team's hometown, a city of about 200,000, fans packed the stadium to mourn a club that had been on the brink of greatness. The team was having the best season in its 43-year history and had fought its way into the championship of one of South America's most prestigious tournaments. It is really hard to speak, says fan Daniel Merlin. We always come to the games, but now we know our team won't be here anymore. It's really tough. At the club's headquarters, family members tried to come to grips with the news. The mother of one of the players killed says her heart is in pieces and she feels a lot of pain. It still hasn't set in, she says. Global soccer is stunned, with tributes pouring in from major figures including Pelé, Lionel Messi, and Wayne Rooney. In a moving gesture, Medellin-based Atlético Nacional, which was supposed to take on Chapecoense in the final, has asked that the championship title be given to the Brazilian team. UB News.
Elsewhere in the Americas, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has chosen 3 nominees for his cabinet who have deep ties to Washington and Wall Street. Trump has picked Elaine Chao to become Transportation Secretary. Chao's record as Secretary of Labor under President George W. Bush suggests she will have a light hand when it comes to safety regulation as head of the Transportation Department. Taiwan-born Chao is married to U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Republican Representative Tom Price, an orthopedic surgeon, has been chosen to oversee the nation's healthcare system. Price has been a fierce critic of Obamacare. Meanwhile, an official announcement is expected to confirm that former Goldman Sachs executive Steven Mnuchin will be chosen as Treasury Secretary, and all 3 require Senate confirmation.
Investigators are looking deeper into the possibility that a Somali-born student who attacked 11 people at Ohio State University may have been self-radicalized. Abdul Razak Ali Artan was not known to FBI counter-terrorism authorities before he plowed his car into pedestrians, then slashed victims with a butcher's knife. He was shot to death by police soon after the attack. Officials say a search of Artan's apartment reveals terrorism was a possible motive. Authorities say they are learning Artan stewed over the treatment of Muslims while apparently staying under the radar of law enforcement. They say Facebook posts apparently written shortly before the attack show he nursed grievances against the U.S.
Tens of thousands gathered at Havana's Revolution Square last night amid the ongoing memorials for the late Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Fidel's brother and the current Cuban president, Raúl Castro, led the tributes in a speech delivered at the square. Many foreign officials and diplomats were also there, including some of Latin America's high-profile political figures, such as Bolivian President Evo Morales and Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Also there were the presidents of South Africa and Zimbabwe, as well as China's Vice President Li Yuanchao.
British police investigating sexual abuse in youth football say they've received calls from 250 people. It comes as football's world governing body FIFA says the high-profile scandal could lead to offences by youth development coaches being exposed worldwide. Another football club, Chelsea, has opened an investigation into an employee from the 1970s who is now dead. Former professionals have been speaking publicly for the first time over the last 2 weeks about the ordeals they went through as youngsters. OK, Tony, some sport?
Yes, football.